There's something deeply important we need to talk about today, something foundational, and that's the brain. More specifically, how you train it, how you deliberately shape the internal state of your mind in a world that constantly demands your attention, hijacks your focus, and exhausts your energy. I want to tell you something that may sound simple, but it is powerful. The quality of your mind determines the quality of your life. Right now, your nervous system is being bombarded by sensory input, by information, by social media, by notifications, by flashing screens and noise. Your brain, by design, is a prediction machine, constantly working to process all of this in real time. But here's the reality: it's not built to withstand the kind of persistent stimulation most people live with today. And the cost: chronic stress, poor focus, poor sleep, emotional volatility, mental fatigue. So what do? We look to those who have mastered the inner world. We look to monks, not because they live far away in some temple, not because they wear robes or shave their heads, but because they have learned, through neurobiologically aligned practice, how to tame the chaos of the mind. They've become masters of neural self-regulation. And what that means in scientific terms is, they've trained the prefrontal cortex, they've downregulated the amygdala, and they've built a deeply resilient default mode network. That's not mysticism, that's neuroscience. Let's start with a principle. If you do not build moments of silence into your life, your brain will start to drown in noise. And when the brain drowns in noise, it loses its ability to generate clarity, creative thought, and resilience. Silence isn't just peaceful, it's necessary for neuroplasticity. When you eliminate distraction, you create what's known as an open window in the nervous system for focused learning and adaptation. Think about that. Now, why is this so crucial? Because your attention is under attack. Every ping from your phone, every scroll on your feed, every multitasking behavior is fragmenting the circuitry of your brain that's responsible for deliberate focus. And when those circuits weaken, your ability to think deeply, to control your emotions, to set goals and follow through, it all collapses. This is why monks value silence. It's not just about being quiet. It's about deliberately shifting the brain from reactive mode into reflective mode. What happens in silence is fascinating. The default mode network. This is a set of brain regions involved in self-referential thought, in understanding who you are, in accessing long-term memory and emotional regulation. It starts to hum. And that hum in silence is where you gain insight. It's where you actually start to process unresolved emotion, lingering stress, old beliefs that no longer serve you. You can't do that while being constantly stimulated. So, the first thing I would prescribe, not in a mystical sense, but in a neurobiological one, is this: commit to 10 minutes of deliberate silence every morning. And when I say silence, I mean no phone, no podcast, no music, no scrolling, nothing. Sit, breathe, observe. Why? Because this trains the anterior cingulate cortex, the part of your brain involved in focus, emotional regulation, and error detection. You're strengthening your ability to notice distraction and redirect attention. That's monk-like behavior. That's mental training, and the neuroscience backs it up. But here's what's even more interesting: when you begin to practice silence, you're also activating the parasympathetic nervous system. You're literally pulling the nervous system out of the stress response, out of the fight or flight state, and into rest and repair. What's happening biologically is a lowering of cortisol, a reduction in heart rate, and a rebalancing of neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin. So silence, practiced intentionally, isn't passive. It's active neuroregulation. It's like lifting weights, but for the brain. And what do monks do with this silence? They use it as the foundation for awareness. They don't react. They reflect. They observe their thoughts, their impulses, their inner landscape. That ability to observe rather than react is perhaps the most powerful human skill. It is what separates those who are enslaved by their thoughts from those who master them. And this brings us to the next core practice: elimination. The elimination of mental poison. What do I mean by that? I mean, most people walk around all day with a brain full of junk, negative self-talk, rumination, catastrophizing, social comparison, toxic patterns they inherited from culture or childhood. These patterns are encoded in the neural circuitry, and without deliberate intervention, they repeat. Over and over, like a broken record, but monks don't allow that repetition. They break the loop. How? Through discipline. Discipline is the deliberate repetition of behavior that overrides the default impulses of the brain. It is, at the neural level, the act of strengthening the prefrontal cortex, your command center, so it can inhibit unhelpful thoughts and behaviors. Think about that. Every time you resist distraction, resist anger, resist a reactive impulse, you're literally building neural strength. You're sculpting your mind, but here's the key. Discipline isn't punishment, it's freedom. It frees the brain from chaos. And it begins with elimination. Start here. Eliminate the low-quality inputs that are hijacking your attention and degrading your neural integrity. That might mean social media. That might mean gossip. That might mean constantly checking the news. If it's not building your mind, it's weakening it. This isn't theoretical. This is neurochemical. Every time you indulge in reactive behavior, you're training your dopamine system to chase novelty instead of mastery. You're diluting your motivation circuits. Over time, that leads to apathy, to foggy thinking, to emotional volatility. What monks do instead is focus. They channel their attention. They eliminate what's unnecessary so they can build what is essential. That's not a philosophy, that's a formula. Let me explain what happens in the brain during this process. When you eliminate low-quality inputs, the brain begins to detox. That's right. There's a kind of cognitive detoxification that occurs when you stop bombarding it with junk. The prefrontal cortex becomes more active. The hippocampus, responsible for memory formation, becomes clearer. You begin to experience something most people haven't felt in years, mental clarity. And from that clarity comes power. The power to direct your thoughts, the power to resist reactivity, the power to choose how you respond. That's monk-level power, and you can train it every day. Start small. Eliminate one distraction in the morning. One notification, one source of digital noise. Replace it with stillness, then expand. Turn your morning routine into a ritual of mental resilience. Wake up, hydrate, breathe, sit in silence, journal, move your body, not to impress the world, but to prime your nervous system for mastery. What you're doing here is training your autonomic nervous system, training the balance between alertness and calm, between focus and recovery. That's the edge, that's where transformation happens, and if you stick with it, if you commit, you will start to feel something powerful. You'll start to feel control, not over the world, but over yourself, and that is the beginning of liberation. Let's be honest, most people don't feel free, they feel trapped, not by external forces, but by internal chaos. Their own thoughts imprison them, their own behaviors sabotage them, but you don't have to live that way. Your brain is plastic, it's changeable, it's trainable. That's the beauty of the human nervous system. It's adaptable, and it responds to the inputs you give it. So give it powerful inputs, give it silence, give it discipline, give it clarity. Monks aren't superhuman. They're just consistent. They do the work every day, no excuses, and you can too. And here's what's profound. Once you begin to train your brain like a monk, you will notice a shift not just internally, but in your environment. People will notice your calm, your presence, your clarity. You'll speak less, but your words will carry more weight. You'll act less impulsively, but your actions will have more impact. That's not magic, that's neuroscience. A trained mind reshapes reality. This isn't about being a monk. It's about thinking like one, training like one. Living with the same kind of intentionality and discipline that leads to inner freedom. You don't need to live in a monastery. Your life can be the monastery if you make it one. One of the most overlooked yet profoundly transformative tools available to us, one that monks have harnessed for centuries, is the breath. Not just the act of breathing, but the conscious regulation of breath as a means to regulate the entire nervous system. And what I want you to understand is this: your breath is not passive. It's not just background noise in your physiology. It is a dial, one you can turn at will, to shift your brain state on demand. Now, let's back up and get scientific for a moment. Your autonomic nervous system has two primary branches: the sympathetic nervous system, responsible for alertness and arousal, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which brings about calm, rest, and repair. These systems are like the gas and the brakes of a car, and what's the steering wheel? Breath. Monks have known this for thousands of years, long before MRI or EG, because they've practiced it. But modern neuroscience now confirms it. By changing the rhythm, depth, and frequency of your breath, you can shift the ratio of activation between these two systems. You can literally change your state mentally, emotionally, and even spiritually just by changing how you breathe. In my lab at Stanford, we've studied this extensively. We've seen that slow, deliberate nasal breathing, specifically inhaling for about 4 seconds, holding briefly, and then exhaling slowly for 6 to 8 seconds, activates the vagus nerve. That's the main communication channel of the parasympathetic nervous system. When the vagus nerve is stimulated, heart rate slows, blood pressure decreases, and the brain's threat detection centers, namely the amygdala, calm down. This is not a placebo effect. This is real, time neurophysiological change, and monks without the language of neuroscience knew this. Because they experienced it, so here's what I want you to try. Once a day, at a time when you might usually reach for your phone or caffeine, sit down, close your eyes, and begin a pattern of controlled breathing. Inhale slowly through the nose, expand the diaphragm, pause, then exhale even more slowly. And as you do this, notice what happens in your mind. You'll find your thoughts slow down. You'll find space between stimulus and response. That space is where discipline lives. That space is where freedom lives. Now let me take you even deeper. Breath is not just a regulatory mechanism. It's a gateway to something monks call presence. And presence, from a neuroscientific standpoint, is the activation of the prefrontal cortex and the deactivation of the default mode network. When you're truly present, when your awareness is rooted in your body and not drifting through time, you're in the only place where change can actually occur. The present moment is the only space in which neuroplasticity is possible. You can't rewire your brain in the past. You can't rewire it in the future. It happens now, and breath is the anchor that pulls you into now. We often hear about mindfulness, but let me redefine it for you. Mindfulness is the art of directing attention. That's it, and your breath is the most direct, most primal, most portable tool for doing exactly that. If you can control your breath, you can control your attention. And if you can control your attention, you can shape your mind. That's the sequence, but let's not stop at calm. Breath can also be used to generate alertness, focus, and energy. Monks train for both sides of the nervous system, calm and intensity, and so should you. In situations where you need to be laser-focused, short bursts of rapid inhales through the nose followed by a longer exhale, what we call physiological sighing, can boost adrenaline just enough to create clarity and readiness without triggering anxiety. This is how you prepare your brain to perform under pressure. Whether you're walking into a difficult conversation, about to give a presentation, or needing to power through deep work, use breath as a performance tool. Now, I want to share something personal. In high-stakes environments, whether it's a scientific presentation, a performance training, or simply navigating personal conflict, I don't rely on motivation. I rely on breathing because it's reliable, because I can control it. It doesn't lie, it doesn't flinch. And neither should you. Breathe like a monk, live like a warrior. Let's shift to the next critical aspect of monk-level brain training, observation of thought. This is one of the most advanced, but also most liberating practices you can implement, And here's the core idea. You are not your thoughts. You are the observer of your thoughts. Now, that might sound abstract, but it's grounded in neuroscience. When you begin to observe your thoughts rather than automatically identifying with them, a few fascinating things occur. First, the medial prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for self-referential processing, becomes less active. That means you're loosening the grip of ego. You're dissolving the false identity of I am my thoughts and replacing it with I am the observer of my thoughts. That distinction is everything. Monks call this witness consciousness. In neuroscience, we might call it metacognition. Whatever the label, the effect is profound. When you begin to watch your thoughts arise without judgment, you decouple emotion from cognition. You start to see patterns. Oh, I always react like this when I feel threatened. Oh, that story I keep repeating isn't true. It's just old wiring. This awareness is not just intellectual. It's neural. You're activating higher-order brain regions that can inhibit impulsive responses. You're building a buffer between stimulus and reaction. And that buffer is what gives you power. Let me give you a practice. Every morning, or at night if you prefer, spend 5 minutes in a seated posture, eyes closed, and simply watch your thoughts. Don't try to stop them. Don't judge them. Just notice them. Label them if you like. Planning, judging, remembering, fantasizing. That act of labeling engages the prefrontal cortex and brings order to chaos. It's like turning on a light in a dark room. You begin to see, and once you see, you can change. Monks have a phrase, sit, observe, do nothing. But it's not really doing nothing. It's doing the most important thing, training awareness. And from a neurobiological perspective, this is perhaps the highest form of mental training available, because it integrates multiple brain systems, attentional networks, emotional regulation circuits, memory systems, and even the insula, which is involved in body awareness and empathy. This practice also trains equanimity. Equanimity is not indifference, it's not apathy, it's balance. It's the ability to face pain or pleasure, gain or loss, praise or criticism, and remain centered. And here's the key. Equanimity isn't a trait you're born with. It's a skill you build, and observation of thought is the training ground. What you're doing from a neurological standpoint is creating cognitive space. You're shifting from reaction to response, and you're doing it by leveraging the brain's capacity for self-regulation. That's not just mental toughness, that's neural elegance. Now, let's address the resistance you might feel. You might say, I can't stop my thoughts. My mind is too loud. Good. That means you're alive. That means your brain is functioning. The goal is not to stop thought. The goal is to become larger than the thought, to witness it without getting swept away. That's when you reclaim authority over your mind. In my lab, we've studied this. Individuals who engage in even brief daily mindfulness practice, specifically observation of thought, show measurable changes in brain structure. Increased gray matter in the hippocampus, reduced volume in the amygdala, strengthened connectivity in the default mode network. What does that mean in real life? Better memory, less fear, more clarity. That's not a spiritual promise. That's a scientific result. And when you combine breathwork with thought observation, something profound happens. Your entire nervous system begins to harmonize. You move through the world not as a reactor, but as a creator. Not as a victim of your thoughts, but as the architect of your mind. So let me say this clearly. You don't have to be a monk to think like one. But you do need to train, you need to breathe deliberately, you need to observe your mind, you need to commit to the practices that build the brain you want to live with. Because here's the truth, you live with your brain every moment of every day. You might as well make it a place you want to inhabit. You might as well make it a place of focus, of calm, of strength, not by accident, but by training. Breath by breath, thought by thought, practice by practice. The tools are ancient, The science is modern. The path is yours to walk, and if you truly commit, your mind will become unshakable, not because the world changes, but because you do, because your brain becomes the calm within the storm, the eye at the center of the hurricane. That's monk training, that's neuroscience, and that's the future of personal mastery.